What's up, guys? Welcome back to Lex's Poker Vlog. This is episode number 56, and for this one, Lex is playing 5-10 at Bellagio. He gets into a ton of big hands, and I'm pretty sure he's going to crush it. I have a lot of faith in his abilities, so hope you guys enjoy it. Let's go ahead and get started.
Here we go at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, buying in for $1,500. Let's get right into the first hand. There's a raise from under the gun to 40, a call. I look down an ace-jack of clubs in the small blind. Sometimes I'll be 3-betting and other times I'll just call. This time I decided to just make the call. 3 ways to the flop, which comes out ace, 5, 8. We flop top pair. I decide to check. The initial raiser from under the gun bets out $50. The next player calls pretty quickly, and I think on this board I'm going to be ahead a lot of the time. Instead of check calling and playing the hand out of position, I decide to take the aggressive route and put in a raise. I make it $200, trying to get value from all weaker aces, straight draws, and flush draws. The under the gun player thinks for a little bit of time and decides to let his hand go, and the next player folds as well, so we end up taking down our first pot here at the Bellagio playing 5-10. At the end of this video, I'm going to go over my full Vegas trip results, so stay tuned for that. Moving on to the next hand, I have Queen 10 offsuit in the big blind. There's a raise. I make the call. We end up going heads up to the flop of 10, 7, 8, 2 hearts. We flop top pair on a super wet and connected board. I check. My opponent bets $40, and my hand is way too strong to fold, but not strong enough to raise, so I just put in the call, going to the turn, which is the king of clubs. Not the best card. I check. He continues to bet, and I think that he'll be betting here with a lot of his bluffs, or he could be betting with hands like king jack, king queen, and ace king. He puts out a bet of $120, and whenever he bets this turn card, he's pretty polarized to a king or better, so I'm not convinced just yet. I make the call. I want to see what he does on the river, which is another 8. It pairs the board. It's a pretty good card, actually. I check it over to him, looking to potentially check call depending on what the bet is. However, he thinks for a little bit of time and decides to give up. He checks back. I show queen 10 for a 10, and he mucks. Next up, there's a raise to 30, a 3-bet to 80 by 2 action players. I decide to cold call 80 in the small blind with pocket 6s. Normally, I would never cold call a 3-bet out of position with a pocket pair, but I feel like if I hit my set, I can win a big, massive pot. The under the gun player makes the call as well, so we're going 3 ways to a flop in a 3-bet pot, which comes out 10, 8, 6. We make our set. It doesn't get much better than flopping a set in a big pot. I check, and it checks all the way through. Oh, come on, someone's got to bet that board. The turn card is a 4. Shouldn't change anything at all, and now I'm going to be putting out a bet of my own, trying to get value from anything here, maybe a straight draw, a flush draw, maybe someone slow played an overpair possibly. I put out a bet of $150, praying to get some action. The first player decides to fold, and the 3-better gives his cards back to the dealer. No more action here with our set, but we do take down our third pot of the night. Brad Owen must have gave us some run good in the intro because we are crushing this session so far. 3 for 3, making some hands, and it's only going to get better from here. I look down at queen 9 offsuit on the button, make it 30. The big blind makes the call, heads up to a flop of jack 10-4. We end up flopping an open-ender with 1 overcard. My opponent checks, and I put out a $40 C-bet, and he seems like he's pretty sick of me. He puts in a check raise. He makes it $120. I asked to see my opponent's stack, and he has about $350 left behind the $120 raise, and this is kind of an interesting spot. I wouldn't expect him to have a set of jacks or 10s here. I think he would 3-bet that pre-flop. I don't think he has a 2-pair hand like 10-4 or jack-4, so I'm pretty sure he has a 1-pair hand, maybe ace-jack or king-jack, and if he has one of those 1-pair hands, we're actually doing very well. We have an open-ended straight draw and 1 overcard to the jack. With all that being said, I think the best option here is to just rip it all in. Let's see all 5 cards. So I shove all in for about $1,500, covering my opponent. He ends up making the call very quickly. We end up running the board out. The turn card is a 10, pairs the board. The river's an 8, giving us a straight. I show my queen 9. My opponent seems pretty frustrated and mucks his cards.
Sometimes you win every day, Lex.
Sorry, bro.
It's all good.
The big blind is referring to an Instagram post I made a day before where I said, sometimes I win every single day, and I posted my results for the Vegas trip, which is true. I basically won every single day, but I think it comes off as a little cocky and a little too overconfident, and I don't want the players I'm playing against or my subscribers to think I'm cocky or overconfident, so I kind of regret posting that. However, I'm always going to be real with you guys. I showed you guys the $10,000 pot I lost, the biggest downswing I just went on a couple months ago. So whenever I'm on an upswing, I'm going to be showing that too. If I'm winning every day, I want to document that as well. I want to show you guys the ups and the downs of being a professional poker player. All right, let's get back to the poker. The button opens to 30. The small blind, a very aggressive player, makes it $120. I have ace queen in the big blind, and I decide to put in a 4-bet. I re-raise here to $250, trying to isolate the small blind in position with such a strong hand. He ends up making the call, so we go heads up in a 4-bet pot, which comes out queen high. Now that I'm looking back, I think I should have went much bigger pre-flop, probably around $300 or $340. However, I min raise, he makes the call, we flop top pair, top kicker, can't ask for much better than that. I end up putting out a $170 bet. My hand doesn't need too much protection here. There's really not many draws. I'm putting him on a one pair hand, maybe 9s, 10s, or jacks. And if he has ace king, he only has 3 outs. I bet $170. He thinks for a little bit of time and matches my bet. The dealer collects our chips and puts them in the middle and burns and turns the king of clubs. A very interesting turn card here. My opponent checks, and this is a bad card for my actual hand, but for my perceived 4-betting range, this is actually a very good card. I'm probably the only one who can have ace king here. I think my opponent would probably put in a 5-bet given the fact that he's so aggressive pre-flop. So I feel like this is a weird spot. Should I check or should I bet? I'm not really sure what to do here. After thinking for a while, I ultimately decide to bet around $500, and I'm not really sure what I'm trying to get value from here. I guess I can get him to fold a chop like ace-queen, but I don't really know. I think a check would have been better and let him try to bluff on the river, but he ends up folding pretty quickly, so we end up taking down our 5th pot of the night. We are running hot, 5 for 5, all winning pots, up over $1,000 now on the session. Let's keep this run good going. Next up here, there's an under the gun raise to 40. We look down in the cutoff at pocket queens. I raise it up here to $150, folds all the way back around to the under the gun player who ends up making the call. Whenever this opponent raises from early position and then just calls my 3-bet out of position, I put him mostly on pocket pair hands like 8s, 9s, 10s, and jacks, and maybe some suited Broadway. So when the flop comes 9 high, I'm feeling very good about my hand. He could possibly have outflopped us with a set of 9s, but I think he's going to have a lot of overpairs and possibly some overcards with flush draws. So when he checks to me, I put out a pretty big bet. I make it $180. My opponent contemplates his options, goes back and forth, and ultimately decides to match my bet. He puts in the call for $180, so we're going to the turn card here, which is the 3 of spades. It does bring in the straight draw, 6-7 on the flop, but like I said, I don't expect him to have many suited connectors, raising from early position and then calling my 3-bet. So when he checks to me again, I am definitely going to be betting this card. So I have to figure out what sizing I want to go here. It's less likely my opponent has a flush draw because I have the queen of clubs in my hand. So I block king, queen, ace, queen, or queen, jack of clubs. So he's most likely weighted towards pairs here, like I said before. So I don't want to bet too big where he's going to fold out his pocket 7s, 8s, 10s, and jacks. So I put out a bet of $300, feeling like he can call here with a big portion of his range. I'm still trying to work on bet sizing, and my advice to younger players or newer players out there is to try to pick a bet sizing that your opponent can call you with a wider range of hands. That is how you get value with your big hands. If you overbet the pot or bet huge and your opponent can only call you with hands he's beating you with, you're obviously not getting max value. So I picked $300, which seems like a good price that he can call with all of his pairs and his flush draws, and he agrees. He ends up matching my bet, going to the river, which is the ace of hearts. This is a bad card for 2 reasons. The first one's pretty obvious that it's an overcard to our queens. If he has an ace-high flush draw, he's now beating us. And the second reason is now it's harder to get value from all of those weaker pocket pairs like a 9, pocket 10s, pocket jacks, pocket 8s. And in a 3-bet pot, I'm not really sure what to do on this river. I could go for thin value and bet like $200. But given the fact that I 3-bet pre-flop, bet the flop, and bet the turn, and this is a nitty Vegas game, I decide to just check this one back, and my opponent shows 5-6 of diamonds for a pair of 5s. I show my pocket queens and they are good, but I was totally wrong with my range on this guy. I really did not think he would have many suited connectors, so if he hit his 2 pair or a straight or trips, he would have got paid. The win streak is still alive. We are 6 for 6 on pots that we played so far this session, up around $1,500 so far, running like God, and we still have about 2 hours left to play. In this next hand, it's the same player I 4-bet with ace queen whenever he 3-bet out of the small blind. He's been very aggressive this entire session. He makes it 30. I have queens on the button and decide to put in the trap and just make the call. We end up going heads up to a flop, which comes out 10 high. He puts out a $30 c-bet, and on this board, I want to let him bluff. I don't want to raise, so I make the call, hoping that he'll just blast off his entire stack into me. The turn card is not very good. It's great. It's a queen. We end up making top set, and unfortunately, my opponent checks. I would expect him to be barreling this card almost 100% of the time, but I am not going to be checking back top set of queens. I put out a bet. I make it $70, and to my excitement, my opponent matches my bet. Pretty quickly, he calls $70. I'm not really sure what kind of hand my opponent can have here, but he is very sticky. He could have a 5, a 4, maybe even ace high. So when the river card is a 7 and he checks it over to me, I want to try to figure out what bet sizing I should use here. I could bet smaller, trying to get a crying call from all those one pair hands. But if I had a bluff here, like maybe king jack, ace jack, or possibly jack 9, I would be putting in a large river bet, trying to get him off at 10, or maybe pocket 8s or pocket 9. So I decide to go big. I make it $320. Another reason I went so big on this river is to try to cooler my opponent whenever he rivers 2 pair. Maybe he has a hand like pocket 7s, 10-7, 5-7, or 4-7, and he made 2 pair. I want to try to get max value from that hand whenever I'm coolering him. I can also make it look like a bluff, like I said earlier. Maybe he will level himself into a light call. He goes into the tank for a while, thinks over his options, tanks. I'm praying for a call. Come on. This session is going good already, and it can go even better if he makes his $320 call, but ultimately he decides to fold. This is a dream session. Everything is going right. My hands are holding up, and I'm getting there when I'm behind. You just can't ask for much more than that. Let's keep this run good going. Next up here, there's a straddle on, a raise to 60. I have queen 9 of clubs on the button, decide to make the call. We're heads up to the flop, which comes out 6, 7, deuce, 2 clubs. We end up flopping a flush draw. My opponent checks, and I decide to check this one back. The turn card is the 3 of clubs. We end up making the queen high flush. Did you guys actually think we were not going to hit a flush here? We are just running way too hot this session. My opponent checks, and now I put out a big bet. I make it $120, and he ends up making the call. Like I said before, this opponent is very sticky, so I'm looking for a clean river for us to go for max value. However, we do not get a clean river. It's the ace of clubs. Pretty bad card here. It's going to be less likely my opponent will pay me off now, and if he has the king of clubs, he now beats us. The cutoff thinks for a while and ultimately decides to check, and I think if he had the king of clubs, he would probably lead out on this river, so I feel pretty good about my hand still. I put out a value bet. I make it $200. He doesn't think for too long and puts in the call. I show queen 9 for the queen high flush, and it is good. We are still on the hot streak, 8 for 8 in winning sessions. The chips are still going in our direction. All right, last hand of the session here. There's a raise. We look down on the big blind at pocket 8s and end up making the call. Heads up to the flop, which we make another set. It comes out 8, 9, 3, 2 hearts. I check, and my opponent checks back. The turn card is the 9. Gives us a full house right away, no sweat. I could go in depth of what the solvers would do here, or call Bart Hansen and see what he would do, but it's pretty simple. I have a full house. I'm going to bet it. I make it $40, and my opponent makes the call. The final card here is an offsuit 6, and I could join Upswing Poker and ask Doug Polk what I should do here, or I could maybe ask Alec Torelli what I should do with a full house, but I decide to go with my gut and continue to bet. I make it $100. My opponent thinks over his options and decides to put in the call. Another big hand and another big pot going in our direction. We were 9 for 9 in this quick 4-hour session. Just amazing run for us. That is going to be it. We're going to book this win. We end up racking up our chips, heading to the cage and cashing out for the night. As you guys can see, we are no longer in Vegas anymore. We're here in Florida for a couple days, and I want to go over my Vegas trip results. We ended up playing 15 days total, 95 hours, profiting $15,391, which is an average of $161 per hour. I ended up cashing, profiting 17 out of 23 of my sessions, which is 73% profit, which is way higher than my average. My average is around 60%. So on this trip, we definitely ran very, very well. All right, to break it down by location, ended up winning $14,000 at Bellagio, by far the best location for me. At the Wynn, we won about $4,800. At Resorts World, we lost $675, and then at the Aria, ended up losing around $3,000, but either way, it was a very, very good trip. As for the future, we are heading to Dallas, Texas tomorrow. Gonna spend 1 month in Dallas playing poker, making videos, playing on live streams. Then we're gonna be traveling around the state, maybe going to Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and then probably back out to Vegas, and then maybe Los Angeles. It's gonna be a wild trip. I'm excited to take you guys there with me. Hope you guys enjoyed these crazy Vegas vlogs for the WSOP. I definitely enjoyed the vlogs and the process, meeting all sorts of people. Ended up meeting some other vloggers out there. I met Brad Owen, Rampage, Mariano, all really cool guys. But that is it for this one. Until next time, I'll see you.